Hello, welcome to the Union Pacific Railroad Geneva Subdivision. My name is Daryl Cruz, owner and builder of the layout, and your host for episode 5 of season 2020, which is part 2 of our series on installing roads around the Railroad Park area in Rochelle. This part 2 will focus specifically on the two crossings in this area, the BNSF crossing, which you're looking at right now, and then also the Yupi Crossing. You can see here what we're shooting for, which is a concrete crossing on the BNSF main line. Now, as you can notice, the crossing extends in both directions to include the sidewalks. So it's a new installation, was installed around 2011. And to do the concrete crossing, I'm going to be using the BLMA brass etched crossing kits. As you can see, I've painted this one set here, a concrete color. Need to do a little sanding. When I cut it off the sprue and so forth, some of the clumps should come off and it will smooth out as I install it. Now I'll be using 4 sets for this crossing, since it is such a wide one, including the sidewalks. And so the first thing I did is mark the center line, so I could use that as a guide for putting down the BLMA crossing kits. And I basically will be super gluing these on. And so I just put a bead of super glue on the underside of the concrete crossing, and then very carefully lay it down. The glue I'm using here is a fast setting glue. It sets in about 5 to 10 seconds. So you can move it around a little bit, but you don't have too much time. So you have to make sure it gets to where it needs to be, and then once you hold it down for a bit, it stays in place. When I did the plastering on this crossing, I sanded it very carefully so that the thickness of the plaster plus the thickness of the brass concrete kit from BLMA together was at a correct height to look good, but then also clear the cars, locomotives, specifically then the coupler trip pins, so that it was at the right height. And we'll see some testing that I'll be doing here to make sure that that's the case. Now, after doing the Woodland Scenics smooth it across the road part of the crossing, then I use styrene for the sidewalk areas to extend the crossing to include the sidewalks. And it's 0.03 thickness styrene. And each one was cut specifically for that particular area. And then I have the sidewalks. As you can see, I have the sidewalks leading up to it. There you go. Got 2 more pieces to put on for this particular crossing. I'm going to speed this up a little bit so that you can, I think you kind of get the idea of the process that it takes. Okay, once it was all down, then I just used a caboose that was handy and just kind of ran it across it. There were a couple places where it was hitting the crossing material, so I just used a X-Acto knife to push it down a little bit. Solved most of the issues. Basically what I'm doing here is kind of pushing it to make sure it's kind of under the, or even with the top of the rails. Alright, so then here again in fast motion, we can see the other half being installed. This is an old locomotive truck, Cotto locomotive truck that I use to test clearances on crossings and so forth. I was just basically right now clearing out some of the paint that was in there. And I'll go ahead and put the rest of these on. One thing you can kind of see from this picture, by the way, is was not real happy with the way that the guttering paint came on. If you look at the road where the truck is there, as I continue to put on the rest of the kit here, wasn't really very smooth at all. So turns out I'm going to end up doing that all over again, which does happen from time to time. And just a couple more pieces to put on. All right, one more. All right, there we go. All pieces are in place. Again, this took 4 kits in order to replicate the prototype there at the railroad park. As I said, these concrete crossings were installed around 2011 or so. There were some really old wood ties there that were falling apart around before they put these new ones in. There's also, since 2011, I think sometime since we moved in 2014, they put in a all protective type of crossing to make sure that they can go through without using their horns. So this is going to depict the crossing after 2011 when the crossing was installed, but then before they did the special crossing to eliminate the horns. And that basically means, if you look, when we take a look at the prototype pictures, you can see there's a median down the middle so that the cars cannot cheat across the crossing. All right, I used the bright boy to clear off the paint, any residue, made a double check, and turned out good. Here you can see it. I put some ballast around it to kind of tie it all together to make it all even. This is still not glued down, but you can see how it will look with all the ballast around, and it all kind of blended together. Very happy with how it turned out. All right, we're going to move now to the Yupi Crossing, And as you can see from the prototype photo here, this is a satellite photo. This is the Union Pacific crossing. And track 1, which is the top north track, has concrete crossing almost all the way extended to the sidewalks, and then they have asphalt the rest of the way. I don't know why they didn't just do like the BNSF and put in one more section of concrete, but they did that when they put in the concrete ties. And then the track 2, you just have the concrete in the middle, and then you have wood ties on the ends where the sidewalks then cross. And track 2 is still the wood ties. Now I had a big decision on what to do about this, because the concrete ties were put in around 2006 or 7, somewhere around there, and I started this layout in 2008. So I had a real decision to make. Should I put concrete in or what? I didn't really know what to do, because I didn't want to put in concrete for track 1 and then wood ties for track 2 and then have UP come along and do the concrete on track 2. I was assuming at the time that they were going to do concrete on both tracks. And so I didn't know, exactly what to do. So what my final decision was to simply put wood ties on both tracks. So on my layout, even though the prototype has concrete ties on one and wood ties on the other, I have both of them as being wood ties. So now when I'm doing the crossing, I decided to make both of the tracks not only be wood ties, but have the crossing for both tracks be whether it's concrete in the middle and then wood ties on the end. And so that's what I ended up doing. So here's the UP crossing at 9th Street, and you can see I used wood ties for the sidewalk area, and then just as with the other crossing, just cut pieces of styrene to fill in between, put a little plaster to kind of connect the plaster from the road with the styrene of the for the sidewalk area. The wood ties came from some wood ties that I bought when I was working on the turnouts. And here I painted them railroad tie color, so that looks pretty good. And then I also was able to put in all the ground foam around the tracks. And I forgot about something. When you do the ground foam around the tracks, it's hard not to get the green dye from the ground foam onto the road. And you can't really see too well on these pictures, but on the sidewalks there and on the road too, doing the ground foam and spraying it with water and putting down glue and so forth, it really messes up the roads. And I really wasn't happy with the way the gutters came out anyway, so I made the decisions to completely redo everything. So I painted over everything again. Here you can see I repainted this area. This is the UP crossing again. And as you can see, I repainted it. And I also put, you can see the ballast is on around there to kind of tie it into the ground. Also the ground foam is around, so you can kind of see how the sidewalks and crossings are all kind of tied in. And then here you can see I have one of the two concrete crossings to put in as well. So it turned out pretty good. I ran out of the crossings, had to order some more, and I'm waiting for them to arrive. BLMA was sold to Atlas in 2016, and Atlas has not come out with any more of these, so you have to kind of look hard to find them They're usually not in stock anymore. They're not being produced anymore. But if you search the internet and do some work, you can still find some out there. So I do have some more coming in to finish this one, plus some more crossings. And again, you can see I repainted the whole road. And I'm going to redo the gutters and redo the lines. So I have to always remember, don't worry about painting gutters or doing lines until you get the ground foam installed. But you can see how the ground foam kind of ties everything together here. But this is going to be it for part 2. Part 3 you can look forward to. Part 3 being putting down the gutter again, lines, markings, and other details. So look forward to that on part 3 of roads around the railroad park in Rochelle. As always, have fun enjoying the greatest hobby in the world, model trains, especially in N scale. Hope you have a great day. Take care.